One human act of courage, and the alien empire bowed in silence. Asterisk Jake Morrison never expected his life as a maintenance worker on Mining Station Omega 7 to intersect with galactic politics. The 32-year-old former Marine had chosen the quiet life among the asteroid fields, far from the chaos of Earth's overcrowded cities. His days were spent repairing atmospheric processors and keeping the station's ancient systems running. It was honest work, peaceful work, and exactly what he needed after 2 tours in the Martian colonies. The station housed nearly 3,000 souls, mostly miners and their families. Children played in the recreation domes while their parents extracted precious metals from the surrounding asteroids. It was a small pocket of humanity in the vast emptiness of space, and Jake had grown to love its simple rhythms. Everything changed when the HFY Empire arrived. The alien warships materialized. Without warning, their dark hulls blocking out the stars. Jake was in the main engineering bay when the alarms began screaming. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as panicked voices crackled over the communication systems. Through the viewport, he could see the massive vessels, each one larger than the entire mining station. Captain Reynolds, the station commander, appeared on every screen throughout the facility. His weathered face was grim as he delivered the news. All personnel, we are under occupation by the HFY Empire. They claim authority over this sector under their expansion protocols. We are ordered to comply with all demands and await further instructions. Jake's hands clenched into fists. He had seen what the HFY did to human colonies that resisted. The news feeds from the outer rim told stories of entire populations relocated, their resources stripped, their way of life destroyed. The HFY called it efficient integration, but Jake knew oppression when he saw it. The first HFY delegation arrived within hours. They were tall, insectoid beings with chitinous exoskeletons and multifaceted eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Their leader, who introduced himself as Overseer Zekthal, spoke in perfect but cold English through a translation device attached to his throat. This facility will be restructured for optimal efficiency, Zekthal announced to the assembled workers. Human labor will be redirected to serve the Empire's needs. Your families will be relocated to designated residential zones. Compliance is mandatory. The crowd murmured with fear and anger, but no one dared speak up. Jake watched from the back, his jaw tight with suppressed fury. These people had built their lives here, created a community, raised their children in the safety of the station. Now it was all being swept away by alien bureaucracy. Production quotas will increase by 40%, Zekthal continued. Working shifts will be extended to 12 hours. Recreation facilities will be converted to additional living quarters. Any resistance will be met with severe consequences. A young woman near the front, barely out of her teens, raised her trembling hand. What about our children? They need the recreation areas for school and play. Zekthal's compound eyes fixed on her with disturbing intensity. Juvenile humans will be educated in HFY protocols. Play is inefficient and will be discontinued. The woman's face crumpled, but she said nothing more. Jake felt something crack inside his chest. These were good people, hard-working families who had never hurt anyone. They deserved better than this cold, calculating cruelty. As the meeting dispersed, Jake found himself walking the station's corridors with new eyes. He saw the fear in people's faces, the way they hunched their shoulders and avoided eye contact with the HFY soldiers now patrolling the halls. The aliens moved with mechanical precision, their weapons humming with barely contained energy. In the weeks that followed, Jake watched his home transform into something unrecognizable. The warm lighting was replaced with harsh, efficient illumination. The community garden where children had learned to grow vegetables was converted into a barracks. Families were separated, crammed into smaller quarters to make room for Kethver operations. Jake kept his head down and did his job, but inside, a fire was building. He had sworn an oath once, long ago, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. That oath hadn't expired when he left the service. As he lay in his cramped quarters each night, listening to the quiet sobs of his neighbors, Jake Morrison began to plan. 3 months into the occupation, Jake Morrison had become a ghost in his own home. He moved through the station's maintenance, tunnels like a shadow, learning every pipe, every conduit, every hidden passage that the Kethver hadn't bothered to map. His official duties gave him access to areas others couldn't reach, and he used that freedom to gather information that the Kethvar had transformed mining station Omega-7 into a highly efficient but soulless operation. Production had indeed increased, but at a terrible cost. Workers collapsed from exhaustion, families were torn apart by the new housing assignments, and the children had grown quiet and afraid. The aliens seemed incapable of understanding that humans needed more than mere survival to truly live. Jake's breaking point came on a Tuesday that started like any other. He was replacing a damaged air recycler in Section C when he heard crying coming from a nearby storage compartment. Inside, he found 8-year-old Tommy Chun, the son of one of the miners, curled up in a ball among the supply crates. "Hey there, buddy," Jake said softly, kneeling down beside the boy. "What's going on?" Tommy looked up with tear-stained eyes. "They took my dad," he whispered. "The bug people took him away because he was too slow in the mines. Mom says he's going to the correction facility, but I heard the grown-ups talking. They said people don't come back from there." Jake's heart clenched. The correction facility was a Kethver invention, a place where inefficient workers were sent for behavioral adjustment. The few humans who had returned came back changed, their spirits broken, their eyes empty. "Your dad's tough," Jake said, though the words felt hollow. "He'll find a way back to you." Tommy grabbed Jake's sleeve with small, desperate fingers. "Can you help him? You used to be a soldier, right? Can you fight the bug people?" Jake stared into the boy's hopeful eyes and felt the last of his restraint crumble. "I'll try, Tommy. I promise I'll try." That night, Jake began reaching out to other humans on the station. He started with people he trusted, former military personnel and workers who had shown signs of resistance. One by one, he approached them, in secret, testing their resolve. The first was Diana Walsh, a former combat medic who now worked in the station's medical bay. She had been quietly treating workers who pushed themselves too hard, hiding injuries that might get them sent to the correction facility. "I've been waiting for someone to make the first move," Diana told him during a clandestine meeting in the old observation lounge. "I can't stand watching these people suffer anymore." Next was Rodriguez, a mining foreman who had been demoted for questioning Kethver efficiency protocols. His knowledge of the station's industrial systems would be invaluable. "They don't understand." "U.S.," Rodriguez said, his weathered hands clenched in frustration. "They think we're just machines that need fuel and maintenance. They don't see that we're people with hearts and dreams." One by one, Jake built his network. Each person he recruited brought others, until they had a small but dedicated group of resistors. They called themselves the Omega Guard, after the station's designation, and they began planning something unprecedented, a coordinated act of defiance against the Kethver Empire. The plan was simple but dangerous. During the next major shift change, when most of the Kethver supervisors would be in their command center reviewing daily reports, the Omega Guard would simultaneously shut down critical systems throughout the station. Not enough to endanger lives, but enough to send a message that humanity would not be quietly crushed. Jake coordinated the operation from the central maintenance hub, his fingers flying over control panels as he prepared to cut power to non-essential systems. Around the station, his allies were in position, ready to disable mining equipment, lock down storage areas, and generally create chaos. "Remember," Jake whispered into his communicator, "we're not trying to destroy anything. We're just showing them that we're still human beings with dignity and worth." The operation began at exactly 14 o'clock hours. Across the station, lights flickered and died, conveyor belts ground to a halt, and communication systems went silent. For the first time in months, the constant hum of Kethvor efficiency was replaced by something else, the sound of human defiance. Jake watched the security feeds as Kethvor soldiers rushed through the corridors, their compound eyes reflecting confusion and anger. They had expected compliance, not resistance. For a brief, shining moment, Jake allowed himself to hope that they had sent a message that would reach beyond the stars. But as Kethvar, reinforcements poured into the station, and his allies were dragged away one by one, Jake realized that their active defiance had only painted a target on their backs. The real test was yet to come. The Kethvar response was swift and brutal. Within hours of the coordinated shutdown, every member of the Omega Guard had been identified and captured. Jake Morrison watched helplessly from his hiding place in the maintenance tunnels as his friends were dragged away in neural restraints, their faces twisted with pain from the alien devices. Overseer Zek Phil's voice echoed through the station's communication system, cold and mechanical. The recent disruption was an act of terrorism against the Kethvar Empire. The perpetrators will face immediate correction. To prevent future incidents, all human personnel will be subject to enhanced monitoring protocols. Jake's hands trembled as he navigated the cramped tunnels, staying ahead of the search teams that swept through the station. He had managed to avoid capture only because he knew the station's hidden passages better than anyone. But he knew it was only a matter of time before they found him. The enhanced monitoring protocols were worse than Jake had imagined. Every human on the station was fitted with a neural collar, a device that monitored their thoughts and emotions for signs of rebellion. The collars also had the ability to deliver painful shocks for any infraction, from working too slowly to showing too much emotion. Jake watched through hidden cameras as his former neighbors walked through the corridors like zombies, their natural human expressions replaced by blank, fearful stares. Children no longer laughed or played. Adults spoke only when necessary, their words carefully chosen to avoid triggering their callers. Diana Walsh had been among the first to be corrected. When she returned to the medical bay, she moved with mechanical precision, her eyes empty of the compassion that had once driven her to help others. She now reported any patient who showed signs of resistance, earning her small rewards from the Kethvar supervisors. Rodriguez had been sent to the correction facility and hadn't returned. Word spread quietly that he had been made an example of, his mind completely broken by Kethvar neural conditioning. His family was told he had died in an industrial accident, but Jake knew the truth. For 3 weeks, Jake lived like a ghost in Tost, the walls of his own home. He survived on emergency rations hidden in maintenance lockers and water from the recycling systems. He watched, he listened, and he planned. But most of all, he grieved for what his act of defiance had cost the people he had tried to protect. The breaking point came when Jake witnessed the Kethvar taking children from their families. Tommy Chun, the boy who had begged Jake to help. His father was among those selected for advanced education in Kethvar facilities. Jake watched through a security feed as the 8-year-old was dragged away, his mother's screams cut short by the neural collar's punishment system. That night, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't save his friends, couldn't undo the damage his resistance had caused, but he could make one final gesture. If he was going to die, he would die in a way that reminded everyone what it meant to be human. Jake spent the next day preparing. He rigged explosive charges throughout the station's power grid, not to destroy the facility, but to create a spectacular display. He recorded a message on every communication device he could access, and he prepared himself for what he knew would be his final act. At 20 o'clock hours, Jake Morrison emerged from the maintenance tunnels and walked calmly to the station's central plaza. The Kethfer soldiers spotted him immediately, their weapons training on him as alarms began to wail. Overseer Zekthul himself appeared, flanked by heavily armed guards. "Human Morrison," Zekthul said, his translation device crackling. "You have caused significant disruption to our operations. Submit to correction immediately." Jake stood in the center of the plaza, his back straight, his chin raised. Around him, humans and neural callers watched with dead eyes, but Jake could see something flickering beneath the surface. A spark of recognition, of remembered pride. "I submit to nothing," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the plaza. "I am a human being, and I refuse to be broken by your efficiency." Zekthul's compound eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. "Your defiance is noted and will be corrected. Guards, prepare the neural restraints." As the Kethfer soldiers moved forward, Jake smiled. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but he had prepared for it. His finger found the detonator hidden in his pocket, connected to the charges he had placed throughout the station systems. "For Tommy Chun," Jake whispered. "For all the children who deserve better than this." The charges detonated simultaneously, plunging the station into darkness. But instead of destruction, Jake had created beauty. The power grid failures triggered emergency lighting systems throughout the station, creating a cascade of colors that painted the walls in brilliant hues. It was chaos, but it was magnificent chaos, a reminder that humans could create wonder even in the darkest moments. In the confusion, Jake felt the neural restraints close around his wrists. But as he was dragged away, he saw something that made his sacrifice worthwhile. In the flickering light of the emergency systems, he saw humans looking up, their eyes alive with something the Kethfar couldn't understand or control: hope. What Jake Morrison didn't know was that his final act of defiance had been witnessed by someone far more important than he could have imagined. High Admiral Kethzara of the Kethfor Imperial Fleet had arrived at Mining Station Omega-7 for a routine inspection, her sleek command ship docking just as Jake's spectacular light show began. Unlike the worker caste Keth-4 who ran the station, Kethzara belonged to the Empire's ruling class. Her exoskeleton was adorned with intricate patterns that marked her rank and achievements, and her compound eyes held an intelligence that most humans had never seen in their oppressors. She had conquered 17 star systems in her career, each one falling to the Empire's relentless efficiency. Kethzara had come to Omega-7 to investigate reports of resistance activity. The station's productivity had dropped despite the enhanced monitoring protocols and several other facilities in the sector were showing similar signs of decline. The Empire's analysts couldn't understand why human workers were becoming less efficient rather than more so under their improved management systems. The Admiral was in the station's command center when Jake emerged from the maintenance tunnels. She watched the confrontation unfold on the security monitors, her attention caught by something unusual in the humans' behavior. Where other humans showed fear or resignation when facing Kethfer authority, this one displayed something else entirely. "Overseer Zekthul," Kethzara said, her voice carrying the authority of her rank. "I will observe this interaction personally." She arrived at the central plaza just as Jake made his defiant declaration. Kethzara had heard countless humans beg for mercy, offer bribes, or simply collapse in terror when faced with correction. But this human stood straight, his voice steady, his eyes blazing with an emotion she had never seen before. When Jake triggered his light display, Keth-Zara experienced something unprecedented: confusion. The human had sabotaged the station's power grid, but instead of causing destruction, he had created something beautiful. The cascading lights painted the walls in brilliant colors, transforming the sterile facility into something that made her compound eyes hurt to look at directly. But it wasn't the lights that truly captured her attention. It was what happened to the other humans. For months, Keth-Zara had observed the neural collar system working perfectly. Humans with the devices showed no signs of rebellion, worked efficiently, and caused no disruptions. But as Jake's lights danced across the walls, she saw something impossible. The humans were looking up. Their neural collars should have prevented such behavior. The devices were designed to suppress curiosity, wonder, and any emotion that might lead to rebellion. Yet here they were, hundreds of them, lifting their heads to watch Jake's display with something that looked almost like joy. Fascinating, Keth-Zara murmured, her scientific mind racing. She had studied 17 different species during her conquests, but humans continued to surprise her. Their behavior often defied logical prediction, and this moment was the most illogical she had ever witnessed. As Jake was dragged away in neural restraints, Keth-Zara made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Instead of ordering immediate correction, she commanded that the human be brought to her private quarters for questioning. She needed to understand what had just happened. Jake was brought before her in chains, his body bearing the marks of the neural restraints, but his spirit apparently unbroken. Keth-Zara studied him with the intensity of a scientist examining a new specimen, her compound eyes reflecting the soft light of her chambers. "Human Morrison," she said, her translation device rendering her words in perfect English. "You have created an intriguing paradox. You sabotaged our systems, but created beauty instead of destruction. You faced certain death, but showed no fear. Explain this behavior." Jake raised his head, needing her gaze directly. Most humans couldn't look at a Keth-Var without flinching, but this one seemed completely unafraid. "I did what any human would do when their family is threatened. I fought back." "Family?" Keth-Zara's mandibles clicked with confusion. "Your genetic relatives are not present on this station." "Not blood family," Jake said, his voice steady despite his restraints. "The family you choose, the people you care about, the children you want to protect. You wouldn't understand." Keth-Zara's compound eyes glittered. "Indeed, I do not. The Kethver do not form emotional attachments to unrelated individuals. It is inefficient. Yet you risked your life for beings who share no genetic material with you. Why?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, and Keth-Zara thought he might refuse to answer. But then he spoke, his words carrying a weight that made her exoskeleton tingle with an unfamiliar sensation. "Because that's what makes us human. We don't just survive. We live. We love. We protect each other not because we have to, but because we choose to. Your neural collars can control our actions, but they can't control our hearts. And as long as we have hearts, we'll find ways to be human." Keth-Zara found herself leaning forward, her scientific curiosity fully engaged. "And what of efficiency? What of order? Your emotions cause chaos, reduce productivity, create unnecessary conflict." Jake's smile was sad but genuine. "Maybe, but they also create art, music, love, and hope. They make life worth living, not just surviving. When Tommy Chun asked me to help his father, I could have said no. It would have been more efficient. But I said yes, because that's what humans do for each other." For the first time in her long military career, High Admiral Keth-Zara felt something crack in her certainty. She had built her reputation on understanding the species she conquered, but she was beginning to realize that she had never truly understood humans at all. High Admiral Keth-Zara spent the next 3 days in her private chambers, studying everything the Empire had recorded about human behavior. The data was extensive, covering dozens of colonies and billions of individual humans, but Jake Morrison's words had revealed a fundamental flaw in their understanding. The Kethver had always viewed humans as inefficient biological machines that needed proper management. Their emotional responses were seen as design flaws to be corrected, their social bonds as distractions from productive work. But Jake's defiant act had demonstrated something that challenged the Empire's core assumptions about conquered species. Kef Zara reviewed the footage of Jake's light display hundreds of times, analyzing every frame. She watched the faces of the humans as they looked up, their neural collars flickering with confused signals as the devices struggled to suppress emotions they weren't designed to handle. Wonder, hope, and defiance had broken through the Empire's most advanced control systems. On the fourth day, she made a decision that would send shockwaves through the Kethvar hierarchy. She ordered Jake brought to her chambers again, but this time without restraints. Jake entered cautiously, his eyes taking in the sophisticated technology that surrounded him. Kethzara's quarters were a marvel of alien engineering, with walls that shifted color and pattern according to her moods, and displays that showed star charts of the entire empire. "You have forced me to reconsider our methods," Kethzara said without preamble. "The neural collar system is failing across multiple sectors. Human productivity continues to decline despite enhanced monitoring. Your species is proving remarkably resistant to our integration protocols." Jake remained standing, his posture alert but not aggressive. "Maybe because we're not machines you can reprogram. We're living beings with souls." "Souls," Kethzara repeated, her translation device struggling with the concept. "An unquantifiable essence that drives irrational behavior. The Kethver have no equivalent." "That's probably why you don't understand us," Jake said. "You see everything in terms of efficiency and production. But humans need more than that. We need purpose, connection, hope. Take those away, and you destroy the very thing that makes us useful to you." Kethzara's compound eyes studied him intently. "Explain." Jake took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "When humans are happy, when they have something to fight for, they can accomplish incredible things. We've built cities that reach the clouds, sent ships to distant stars, created art that can make you cry. But when you strip away our humanity, we become exactly what you've been seeing, empty shells that go through the motions without caring about the results. And if we were to restore these emotional connections, allow humans to maintain their social bonds, you'd probably see productivity increase beyond anything you've achieved with the collars," Jake said. "But you'd also have to accept that humans will always choose their families over your empire when forced to choose." Kethzara was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she spoke. "I am going to conduct an experiment. On this station only, we will remove the neural collars and restore previous living arrangements. Human workers will be allowed to maintain their social structures while meeting production quotas. But you, Jake Morrison, will be held personally responsible for the results." Jake's eyes widened. "You're trusting me?" "I am testing a hypothesis," Kethzara corrected. "If human productivity increases under these conditions, the Empire may need to reconsider its integration protocols. If it decreases, you and everyone on this station will face immediate correction. Do you accept these terms?" Jake thought of Tommy Chun, of Diana Walsh, of all the families torn apart by Kethver efficiency. "Yes, I accept." The transformation of mining station Omega-7 began immediately. The neural collars were removed, families were reunited, and the community spaces were restored. Jake found himself in the unprecedented position of being a human liaison to the Kethver Empire, translating between two species that had never truly understood each other. The results were remarkable. Within a month, productivity had increased. by 60%. More importantly, the humans seemed to come alive again. Children played in the recreation areas, families gathered for meals, and workers took pride in their labor. The station hummed with an energy that the Kethfer had never seen in their occupied territories. Keth Zara documented everything, her reports to the Imperial Council, growing more detailed and urgent with each passing week. Other high admirals began requesting similar experiments in their sectors. And slowly, the Empire's approach to human integration began to change. Jake never forgot that his courage had started as a simple promise to a frightened child. But as he watched families reunite and saw hope return to faces that had been empty for too long, he realized that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance could reshape the galaxy. The Kethfer Empire had learned something unprecedented. That true strength came not from controlling others, but from understanding them. And it had taken one human's willingness to sacrifice everything for his chosen family to teach them that lesson. In the end, Jake Morrison's act of courage had done more than save mining station Omega-7. It had changed the way an entire empire viewed the species they had conquered, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon against oppression is simply refusing to surrender your humanity. Years later, when historians from dozens of species studied the transformation of the Kethfer Empire, they would point to that moment in the Central Plaza, when a maintenance worker stood up to an alien overlord and lit up the darkness with beauty, instead of destruction. They would call it the beginning of a new age of cooperation between species, built on understanding rather than domination. But Jake Morrison would always remember it as the day he kept his promise to a little boy who just wanted his father to come home.